Hey y'all, welcome back. This week we're going to do something a little bit different. So where we would normally be doing Foodie Friday, we are going to do Friday night Fright Bites. I am going to make a witchcraft cake tonight. And it's witchcraft because it doesn't rely on like regular things like eggs and milk. There's a little bit of magic in it that actually makes it come out perfectly. And while the cake is baking, we are going to tell a scary story. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. And if that sounds like something fun, then stick around and we'll be right back. Okay, here we are. The cake we're going to make tonight is going to taste like chocolate. But in order to get it to be a cake, we have to do a little bit of magic to it. Come on, let me show you. Okay, so we are going to put some dry ingredients into this big bowl. So first, we're going to do 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I wouldn't advise self-rising for this because these measurements have to be really precise. We're going to do 1.5 cups of white flour. We got a little cocoa in there from earlier. We're measuring. We are going to do a 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa, like that. And really there's only one brand for this, and that's going to be this one, Hershey's Special Dark 100% cacao. Hershey's is basically the only chocolate that exists. We are next going to add our little bit of witchcraft. This is our first half of our witchcraft. It is 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. And now we're gonna whisk all that around. Basically, you just want a homogeneous blend where you don't have like lumps of flour, lumps of cocoa. Once it turns like just a beautiful tan color, that's when it is well blended. Next is gonna come the wet ingredients. But here's the important thing. Shake it down till it's even. Okay. You have to make 3 holes. 3 holes, okay? 1, 2, 3. This one has to be a little big down here. It's happy to see you. In 1 hole, you are going to put 3/4 cup of oil. I don't think this hole is very big over here. Let's dig it out a little bit more. Just have to put it in that hole, okay? And then in the other hole, you're going to put 1.5 teaspoons of white vinegar in here. And lastly, you're going to put in 1.5 cups of water. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, are you making cake or salad dressing? Trust me, all this toil and trouble is going to come together and make, honestly, the richest chocolate cake you've probably ever had. No mixer, no eggs, no sifting, no trouble, no problems. Just some dry ingredients, some wet ingredients, and a magic whisk. And you're just gonna mix that up till it's completely blended. Now we're gonna transfer it to a 9x13 ungreased baking pan. You don't even have to grease the pan. This is so easy. Magic makes things easy. Easiest thing in the world, easiest cake in the world. Look at that. Because when you use magic, it makes things so much easier. This is like a magic cake. Flies in the face of everything. And you can even lick the spatula because there's no raw eggs in it. All right, this is going in a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. Now, I was very much inspired by Robert Welsh's Ghosts and Makeup Mondays. I am a big fan of paranormal. If you've had any interaction with me, you'll know that. One of my favorite channels to listen to ghost stories besides Robert's is going to be down in the description. Scary Ghost Stories. She is amazing. Her voice is wonderful, and I really enjoyed listening to her tell ghost stories. And I'm like, it's just amazing it's just so nice to listen to her. And it's like, wait, what are you saying? Nice to listen to ghost stories? Yeah, it's nice to listen to her ghost stories. I believe Robert is doing the Ghost and Makeup Monday every other week. And of course, there's a plethora of other places if you like to listen to ghost stories that you can, but these two are my number one top favorites. Well, I would love to tell some of the ghost stories. I've had paranormal experience. My husband had paranormal experience. I have friends' stories, and I thought, I would love to tell some of these ghost stories, but only in a way that would make it kind of easy to edit. And I thought, well, normally when I do my Foodie Fridays, I tell you a little bit about something that is going on in the video. Maybe we learn about dough, maybe we learn about cuts of beef, that kind of thing. But I thought maybe on the last Friday of every month, we would call it Friday Night Fright Bites. I would share one of these paranormal stories with you. So the one I'm going to tell you about tonight is actually my husband's experience. And he was little, I think it was like 8, say little, when he was about 8 years old, him and his family moved into a very, very big house. It wasn't so much that the house was old, it was that the space didn't make sense to him when they moved in. It was like they had 2 living rooms and 2 dining rooms. The bedrooms were very big, and the doors were like pocket doors. But given that this was in Connecticut, it was kind of common to have pocket doors. Those weren't unusual. And if you don't know what a pocket door is, it's a door that slides open into the wall that it's attached to. So, one week his mother was out of town. She was a teacher, and we'll talk about that story another time. She's actually very famous, but we'll talk about that another time. But she was out of town for an entire week, and so he missed her very much. So he wanted to sleep in her room while she was gone. So the first night he goes in, he gets in bed, gets under the covers, realizes still has one of his shoes on. Typical 8-year-old, right? Realizes he still has one of his shoes on. He takes the shoe off, and there's a closet at the end of the bed. He throws it into the closet. No sooner does he throw it into the closet, and a large black figure comes out of the closet and comes up to the foot of the bed, looks dead at him, and says, and then proceeds to just float back into the closet. And he said he was so terrified he just passed out. Which I would pass out too. I'd be afraid that my mother would be buying a new mattress after an experience like that, for real. Because I just don't think. He didn't have any more experiences like that while they lived in the house. But he was a very curious child. he liked exploring the house. There was a one point in time where he was down on the first floor and he found an old elevator, and the elevator only went down. Like, it didn't go up from the first floor, it went down. And at a different time, he was digging in the yard and discovered that there was an old tunnel that ran between the house and an outbuilding, an old barn. And in his mind, he couldn't really put all these things together. Everything about this house was so weird and so uncommon. And it wasn't until years later when they had somebody visiting and he was telling her some things, and she said, "Oh, didn't you know that was an old funeral home?" Excuse me. I think I heard that in my bad ear. A funeral home. So it had been a funeral home. The landlord had bought it and rented it out as a house, but that explained everything. The 2 living rooms, the 2 dining rooms, those were showing rooms. The tunnel that went from the house to the barn was where all the embalming was done, and then they would bring the body and the casket ready for showing over into the funeral home and take it up to the first floor on the elevator. And the pocket doors are meant to put the funeral home into any configuration necessary depending on the size of the funeral. So you can block off one room for a smaller funeral while leaving 2 or 3 rooms open for a larger funeral. So that kind of explained all of that for him. But while he never had any more experiences in that house, he'd always wondered. And when he first told me this story, I was like, what type of supernatural experience was that? Because there's lots of different supernatural experiences. There's lots of different things in the dark. And it's important, if you believe in these things in the dark, then it's kind of important, like, to know what was that experience. So we thought maybe it was like a dark entity. This is all the lore of these things, okay? But so lore, as the story goes, or this is what is believed. But the lore for dark entities is that they attach to you in some way. So they might just sort of hitch a ride on you for a little while, which it might just be maybe sort of a persistent nagging or down feeling, or I wouldn't want to say depression. It's not like that, but it's just something that sort of attaches itself to you. And honestly, people say that they can catch a glimpse of a dark entity that's sort of attached to them. But then there's other levels of attachment which go all the way down to like possession. But my understanding of the lore is that those entities were never alive. They come from somewhere else. Are they demons or what have you? I don't know. But my understanding of the lore is that they were never alive. They never lived on this earth. They exist, but they were never alive as a person. Does that make sense? So then I said, I think it was a ghost. I think it was actually the spirit of somebody that may have either lived in that house or may have been, their funeral was there, may have been, laid out at a funeral in that house. It may have been one of the many spirits that traveled through that house. And it was trying to tell you something. And I think what it was trying to tell you was, maybe don't throw your shoes into your mom's closet. Like, maybe just while your mom is gone, just be a good boy. So we never really came to a conclusion. Well, we kind of came to a conclusion. We kind of feel like the conclusion is this was a ghost. This was a ghost that was like, you are not going to throw shoes in the closet. We're not having that today. We're not going to have that kind of behavior while your mother is out. You're going to behave. And I think that was the whole point of it, doing this to him, was like saying, no, we're not having it. And did it work? I think it worked. He said he never did it again. So it's really funny. My husband's a very grounded person. He's skeptical. Except about the supernatural. Because of that experience, he's like, yeah, that stuff is probably true. Because this was the experience that he had. So this house was in Connecticut. The house is not there anymore. It was torn down and the lots were sold to build condominiums. We were just up in Maine not September of 2020, but September of 2019. We were in Maine, and we drove up to Maine. So we drove as far as Connecticut, where he had lived. He kind of showed me around, and he showed me where this house, we drove where this house was, because we had looked it up on Google and we were like, oh, does the house still exist? We looked it up on Google and I'm like, I don't think so. I think those are condominiums, or something, because on Google, the picture was so old that it just showed the cleared land with a few condominiums that had already been started. But the actual address was just, cleared land. So we drove past there and it's all condominiums now. And I wonder if, it does make me wonder if there's any residual energy left in that ground, that like, are the people that live in those condominiums having any experiences? Are they like, I don't get it, there's a brand new condominiums, why would they be haunted? So I think that's fascinating. I think that's interesting. As far as for me, I watch a lot of paranormal shows. I know that there's no real like scientific evidence. So it isn't something that you can like really touch. I guess it's something you can see, but it's kind of like nobody ever gets a really good videotape, I guess. We don't really know that we know. But here's the thing about that. So there's something called empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is something like, for instance, this whole stupid thing on TikTok right now where people are saying Helen Keller never existed, or she wasn't a real person. We have pictures of hers. We have books. We have records of her. There are still people who have met her. So, no, she existed. That's empirical evidence. But there is something also called anecdotal evidence. And you know what an anecdote is, and then you know where this is going. And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like like my doctor told me when I told him about my arthritis in my hands. I said, I said, what? I guess then, Tylenol, heat. He said, there's no evidence that heat actually does anything to help ease the pain of arthritis. There's no medical evidence. There's no scientific evidence that heat helps at all. So, you don't have to worry about that if you want to try Bengay or something like that. But basically, Tylenol. But my grandma swore by heat. Both my grandmas actually swore by putting heating pads on their hands when their hands would get sore. They would say the heat would help arthritis. And independently, not people who are all connected on TikTok, but independently, there are thousands upon thousands of other people who say the same thing, that heat helps their arthritis. Wearing warm gloves that have been warmed in the microwave, or heating pads, and that heat surrounding their hands helps. These people are all independent of each other. They haven't heard each other say this. It's not a trend. This is years and years of anecdotal evidence. So, for me, as far as ghosts and spirits and entities and cryptids, there seems to be, just in my opinion, so much anecdotal evidence that it's almost impossible to say, no, absolutely, they don't exist. That's not a real thing. I think it is something that you can just say, I've never had the experience, I don't believe it. But in listening to other people's stories, and a lot of these people are just regular people from different beliefs, different religions, no religion, rich, poor, different ethnicities, different cultures, have all had some ghost story, some spirit story. So to me, it's kind of like, that's a bit too much for me to just wholesale say, no, it doesn't exist. What fascinates me the most is the lore behind all these things. Yes, I'm a supernatural fan, especially because they delved into the lore so much. There's lots of different, and I've watched lots of different television shows and podcasts and whatnot that talk about different things, different experiences, and then the lore behind whatever that is. So that's a little background on me. This is our first Friday night Fright Bites. So I think what's better than having like ghost stories and food? I think those two things go together pretty well. So that is our okay, Google, stop. So that is our story for this month. I hope you liked hearing about that. And it is time now to remove our witchcraft cake. Okay, we are pulling this cake out, and there it is. Is that not the darkest, most beautiful chocolate witchcraft cake you've ever seen? And look, bouncing back, okay, because that's how you tell when a cake is done. You don't stick toothpicks in it. You just push it down and it should bounce back. I'm thinking, how dark was the thing that came out of my husband's closet when he was 8? Was it this dark? I don't know. Okay, so like any good cake, we can't ice this right now. We can't even cut it right now, but I just wanted to show you that beautiful cake. And we made it with no eggs, no milk. This is basically vegan cake. So what makes it turn into cake if you're not using eggs and milk? Okay, so the secret is kind of the same thing. If you've ever made one of those volcanoes in science class, it's the same thing. It is vinegar and baking soda and salt, and the combination of which creates bubbles. So it creates the same kind of bubbles and lift as egg whites do. So while those things give lift, they do not provide the density that egg does. So this cake is not going to be as dense, which is why you want to make sure that it completely cools before you put icing on it. But you can put icing on it if you want to. You can just wait till it cools, maybe still a little bit warm. You can cut it, you can put powdered sugar on it, or you can do a ganache if you want. But it's just like any other chocolate cake, except it's magic. Okay, so thanks for hanging out with me tonight, making our witchcraft cake. I'll put the recipe down in the description. And I hope wherever you are having a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, and a frightening night. Y'all take care of yourself. Make sure you're taking care of each other. And I will see you in my next one. Bye, y'all.